So, good evening, friends. We are going to discuss public administration's first paper, the examination which took place the last Sunday. So, let's go for paper analysis. So, before we begin our discussion on the questions which have been asked, the trend and the pattern, some basic principles that we need to understand and appreciate, which UPSC has been following since long, and it's very simple. What is that? That UPSC is not interested in your knowledge only. UPSC is interested in your knowledge plus your ability to apply such knowledge to the situations which are given in the questions. It means they are looking for those candidates who have developed the ability to think, to analyze, to reflect, those who are very much alert and vigilant, those who have a lot of interest in the developments taking place around. So they have a good command over current developments, not simply because they have been asked to go through the current affairs and current developments by the teachers, but they have a lot of interest in knowing how such things are taking place and what are the principles which are at work behind the curtain, which orchestrate such developments. So what is happening in the government, new policy or programs of the government, the success and failure, the reason behind failure. So this is a kind of critical thinking. You go through the articles, you go through the editorials. It's not like just going through for the heck of it. So some kind of internal processing is gradually taking place, internal processing or documentation in your mind, that these are the important factors which have contributed to the success or failure, and these are the main reason. This is the issue and this is the antecedent. So gradually in the course of time, what you develop actually that contributes immensely in your good performance. So it is not just about going through a few basic books and developing the good knowledge of the subject matter. You will have to develop ability how to apply such understanding to understand and appreciate and reflect on the things around. This is the first thing that if you go to the paper, you will come to know that applied aspect is very much important. In fact, it is not only about public administration, it is for any other subject. Your education can never be complete unless you develop the ability to apply and see the things working under some pattern. And second thing, that in this paper you will find that they have done justice to all the units. I think most of the units, questions have come from the different units. Subject to few exceptions, you will find questions from all the units, but the focus has been more on those areas where it has always been. Like if you go to the first paper syllabus, if you go to the syllabus of public administration, paper 1, you'll find that introduction, organizational theories, what are the units which have found, greater weightage. As usual, that has happened. There has not been any change. So introduction, you have topics like new public management, public choice approach, new public service, new public governance. Then you have organizational theories. You have two questions related to new public management. Then organizational theories questions have been asked from the intellectual contributions made by Herbert Simon, the Mary Parker Follett. Then you have a question not directly on Weberian contribution, but there is a question on bureaucracy, and very, I said, difficult question. Question is not usual on bureaucracy. I will discuss that question. So questions from bureaucracy, Weberian model. Then you have questions from administrative behavior. Administrative behavior consists of, the topics leadership, morale, motivation, decision making. So two questions are there from leadership. So two questions are from the leadership and then from new public management, introduction, then portion of organizational theories, a unit organizational theories, then questions from comparative public administration, public policy, economy and finance. So then a question is also from the techniques of management. So overall, all units, most of the units have found reflection in the paper. So it does not work a shortcut or the strategy does not mean that you focus only on 4 units to the neglect of others. UPSC will punish you very stringently if you go for this kind of strategy. But there's no doubt that few components constitute the very core of the syllabus and which are required to be done in very substantive manner. So introduction, organizational theories, administrative behavior, then you have public policy, comparative public administration, finance. These are the areas which you cannot lose sight of. These are the areas which are required to be done very well. If required, go for two or three or four, five revisions. And one more thing, that when you go through the theories or theoretical contribution made by the scholars, it is just not enough to understand that theory. You have to be capable. You need to develop the ability to apply the understanding of such theory to deal with the practical situation. It means what you learn in paper one, first paper, it can be made use of very smartly in the second paper. One more thing, that in a question, there cannot be reference to the name of the scholar, but there can be a question which demands application of the understanding of the theory of one other scholars. So therefore, it's not like the questions will be asked directly from Weberian contribution. I give an example. Suppose there is a question on open model and closed model. Straightway, there is not a question on system theory. Question is not on system theory. Question is related to new public management. See the nexus. New public management, inspired by new public management theories and principles of new public management, you have public-private partnership model, and this model, its relevance has to be proved in terms of the fact that it avoids the extremes of open model and closed model. So open model and closed model, getting a point? This is something that is related to system theory. So in the system theory, you will see these two the topics on open model or closed model, model synthesis. But system theory and new public management introduction, then public-private partnership, current development, all three blended together in one question. So therefore, you need to visit the full scope of syllabus at least once or twice, because you cannot say that this is important and this is not so much important. You need to understand the nexus of different components in the same question, and then you identify the center of gravity, how much has to be written on public-private partnership, or we just need to refer to that, or how many words are to be written on new public management, and then how open model and closed model, this background has to be made use of from system theory. So as I'm speaking, it appears that it's very much complex. It's not like that. I mean to say, if you are a good student, you have gone through all such things, you know the application, within few seconds you can make it out. Few seconds, I mean to say, just 30 seconds, 40 seconds is enough to make out that this is the link. So what I mean to say, that you need to develop that intellectual spontaneity, and this is possible only when you are constantly alert and vigilant. You take a lot of interest in the current developments. I mean to say that your response to the question comes quite naturally if you have good command over the current affairs and current developments. So paper will not be difficult, for however difficult it may appear, but it is not so much difficult, not difficult for those students who have good command on current developments, and it may be very much difficult. In fact, those students who have they have remained confined to bookish knowledge, so they would live in illusion. They would think that yes, they have written a very good answer on Mary Parker Follett, Herbert Sand, whatever they studied. Questions have been asked from that area only. So they're living illusion. They will be punished very stringently, because Mary Parker Follett standing fine, or Herbert Simon, decision making, theoretical contributions they have understood. But when it comes to apply the same to the given situation, it is not possible. They will end up writing what they know rather than writing what has been asked. This is dangerous. That's why many students, they live in illusion. एग्जाम में लिख करके आ गए, बहुत अच्छा पेपर था, हमने डिसीजन मेकिंग पे था, वो तो पढ़ के गए थे, वो भी लिख दिया, मैं भाग फर्ट भी लिख दिया. अरे तुम ये कह रहे हो, लेकिन क्वेश्चन का जो डिमांड था, क्या आपने वो लिखा जो लिखना चाहिए था, या आपने वो लिखा जो आप जानते थे? So these are the problems. ठीक है? So you need to understand this reality, that having good command over static portion is not enough. Applied aspect is also is required to be taken care of. You need to have good command over current affairs, and thereafter you need to develop writing skill, so that within 150 words you could accommodate the core content of the question. In most of the cases, if you fail to establish link, you are gone. The first requirement is how to interrelate. If this is done, then 50% of case is solved. And after that, you start writing. But if connection is not established, at the very first instance is a gone case. One clear? So this is the pattern of the examination. Let's come to the questions one by one. Clear? और ये तो ऊपर सब जानते ही हैं, ये फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन और फिफ्थ क्वेश्चन ये कंपलसरी है, आपको 5 क्वेश्चंस के आंसर करने हैं, ठीक है? तो फर्स्ट और फिफ्थ जो है वो कंपलसरी है और बाकी 3 क्वेश्चंस हैं वो आप लिखेंगे, लेकिन एक एक सेक्शन से, दोनों सेक्शन से एक एक क्वेश्चन लेना पड़ेगा. सो लेट्स कम टू सेक्शन ए. फर्स्ट सेक्शन में है, इस पे जो क्वेश्चन आप देखिए, इसमें जो है इम्परफेक्ट मार्केट, पहला क्वेश्चन है इम्परफेक्ट मार्केट एंड पॉलिटिकल फैक्टर्स लिमिट द एप्लीकेशन ऑफ पब्लिक चॉइस अप्रोच. इस क्वेश्चन में सेंटर ऑफ ग्रेविटी कहां पे है? एप्लीकेशन ऑफ पब्लिक चॉइस अप्रोच. एप्लीकेशन ऑफ पब्लिक चॉइस अप्रोच इज रेस्ट्रेन्ड और इट इज लिमिटेड. इनिबिटिव फोर्स क्या है इन द एप्लीकेशन ऑफ पब्लिक चॉइस अप्रोच? इनिबिटिव फोर्स क्या है, क्या उसको रोकता है? इम्परफेक्ट मार्केट एंड पॉलिटिकल फैक्टर्स. ठीक है, इम्परफेक्ट मार्केट के बारे में अगर आपको नहीं पता है, पॉलिटिकल फैक्टर्स क्या होते हैं नहीं पता है, तो आंसर नहीं कर पाओगे. इसके बारे में पता होना चाहिए, इसके बारे में पता होना चाहिए, बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं, बेसिक पता होना, क्योंकि 150 वर्ड में से बहुत ज़्यादा लिखने की गुंजाइश नहीं. तो ये दोनों के बारे में पता होना और फिर इन दोनों को रिलेट करना है एप्लीकेशन ऑफ पब्लिक चॉइस अप्रोच. अब यहाँ पब्लिक चॉइस अप्रोच का कोई डेफिनेशन बहुत लंबा चौड़ा नहीं चाहिए, इंट्रोडक्टरी थोड़ा बहुत कुछ लिख सकते हो, ठीक है? तो पब्लिक चॉइस अप्रोच, अनलाइक ट्रेडिशनल पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, पब्लिक चॉइस theory which became very much popular in 70s and 80s. Public choice theory is basically inspired by principles of economic rationality, and public choice theory emphasizes that public administration cannot be called efficient unless it has managed its institutions and agencies in such a way that they provide wide range of goods and services. Why? So as to address the problem of diversity of preferences. यही है पब्लिक चॉइस थियरी. इसके अनुसार efficiency is not only about cost reduction. Efficiency is not only about providing large chunk of goods and then services to the society without any interaction with people, without understanding their preferences. So public choice theory focuses more on preferences. So you cannot address the question of preferences unless you provide wide range of choices. And wide range of choices is not possible if you have only one giant monolithic structure and institution of the government otherwise providing all goods and services. No. So public choice theory's application. What is the application of public choice theory? Public choice theory demands institutional pluralism. More than one institutions, public and private agencies, competing against each other. Institutional pluralism, then free and fair competition. Then only wide range of goods and services can be delivered to society. There can be utility maximization. You can address the individual and collective preferences of the society. In this way, you can be far more efficient and far more effective. So customers' interest, customer satisfaction is the criterion to judge your efficiency. But public choice theory, if it is applied in its spirit, so it aims at widening the range of choices. It aims at providing every person, individual groups and communities the things which they are looking for as per their preferences. So satisfaction is very high, and for that it provides for decentralization, it provides for competition, all such things. So public choice theory's application is inhibited by what? Imperfect competition. So public choice theory's application is inhibited. It is not possible if the market is imperfect. Imperfect market means that you don't have free and fair competition. So public choice theory application demands this institutional pluralism, competition, widening of the range of choices, consumer utility maximization. Point is clear? And imperfect market on the other, but all such things are possible only when market is perfect. And imperfect market का मतलब आपको पता होगा, imperfect market means imperfect market is the one where you don't have free and fair competition, you don't have level playing field for all the players. Imperfect market is the one where the price is determined not so much by the factors like demand and supply. There are many extraneous factors and considerations which actually affect the prices of the goods and services. Market is not so much predictable. Consumers are not so much informed. Getting a point? So this can, and then if these imperfect market factors, these are accompanied by political factors as well, like political leadership of the country lacks that vision. It does not encourage free and fair competition. Its policies are deficient. Getting up in political factors, they are not willing to bring desirable changes in bureaucracy, which is required. So again, the tendency is there to control and regulate, to show favor to one, institutions or agencies or some private sector entities to the exclusion of others. So if this kind of regulatory mechanism is not very much strong, so political factors like misuse of discretionary power, corruption, then focus on value-centric decisions rather than fact-centric decisions inspired by or based on principles of economics and commerce. So political factors and the factors of imperfect competition, both of them put together create such an environment where application of public choice approach becomes difficult. What is clear? So you have to focus on public choice. It's not very much difficult. So public choice approach, applying public choice theory, unlike traditional theory, public choice theory in application demands institutional pluralism, then competition, then reduction in the state monopoly, decentralization of decision making. Getting a point? Decentralization of decision making, and then informed citizenry, and lot many things, and concern for diversity of preferences and market stability, but in terms of regulatory norms and others, which cannot be possible unless you have perfect market, which is not possible if you have imperfect market, and you have too much of interference by the political leadership, and you have negative political interferences and non-supportive political factors. This is the point which has to be highlighted. First question, then निर्णय लेने की उत्कृष्ट कला व निर्णय लेना नहीं. If the fine art of decision making is not making decisions that others can take. Comment. Organization's success and failure. ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ये डिसीजन मेकिंग पे है, लेकिन डिसीजन मेकिंग पे सीधे कोई क्वेश्चन ऐसा नहीं. इसको कैसे समझोगे कि डिसीजन मेकिंग इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट एक्टिविटीज इन एनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. Organizations become a success or failure to a great extent depending on what, how, and why of decision making. Who takes the decision? How decisions are taken? And why such decisions are taken. So what, how, and why of decision making is very much important for the success and failure of any organization. It is such an important activity in any organization that it is found at all the levels, the top level, the middle level, or the lower level. But the scope and content of decision making differs from level to level. Point is clear? So efficiency of organization depends heavily on what, how, and why of decision making. Now come to the question, how to deal with that. That making, the fine art of decision making is not making decisions that others can take. So human resource should be deployed optimally in the organization. Getting a point? You have to elicit best of the services from every single member of the organization, and this is applicable to decision making as well. So those who are capable of taking strategic decisions, they should be involved in strategic decisions only. If they are taking such decisions, tactical and operational decisions, which anybody can take in the organization at the lower or middle level, so in that case, there is a huge loss for the organization. Human resource, in that case, you can say that human resource has not been deployed properly. So how can organizations be efficient? So therefore, in organizations, you have programmed decisions, you have non-programmed decisions. For example, programmed decisions, non-programmed. Those who are capable of taking non-programmed decisions, they should not be involved in routine and programmed decisions. Routine and programmed decisions are very much, they are easier to be taken because you have already established precedent, rules, regulation, you have protocols. So according decisions are taken. It does not need application of intellectual spontaneity, that much wisdom, knowledge, ability to anticipate things in future. These are the things which we expect from those highly experienced persons in the organization sitting at the top, they are framing the policies, they're taking decisions. So in the organization, a fine art of decision making lies in not taking those decisions which can be taken by others. So sir, you do not focus on, you should not focus on tactical and operational decisions which can be taken by officials at the middle and the low level. So you should focus more on static decisions. You should focus more on non-programmed decisions. So that will make the organization very much efficient. Clear? There will not be an indirect loss of human potential. And there will be a very effective and productive deployment of human potential capabilities as far as decision making is concerned here. The fine of decision making is not making decisions that others can make. Clear? Then you have has the media nixed its role in holding the government accountable and ensuring transparency? Argue. So you have to argue. You can argue. Argue means you can argue in favor or you can argue in against. Okay? So it is your choice. You can say that yes, media has nixed the role शून्य हो गया, has nixed its role in enforcing the accountability of the government because of their own political. लेकिन ये बहुत प्रैक्टिकल नहीं होगा, ये आंसर बहुत अच्छा नहीं होगा. यू आर फ्री टू राइट. अगर आपके पास बहुत सब्सटेंटिव आर्गूमेंट्स और फैक्ट्स अगर हैं तो आप कर सकते हैं, लेकिन इसका ज़्यादा अच्छा आंसर मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि वो हो सकता है कि आप एक बैलेंस्ड अप्रोच लें. It is not that the media has totally abdicated its responsibility to enforce the accountability of the government. Media is today involved in multifaceted activities and functions. Media in the context of any modern vibrant democracy. Media has a very important role to play as an intermediary between government on the one hand, society on the other hand. Media is involved as a media is involved in investigation. Media is involved in educating the masses. So they are involved in more than one capacity. They constitute a think tank because they facilitate debate and discuss on various issues of national and international importance. They provide that platform where the experts from the different fields assemble, debate and discussion takes place. They contribute, they provide policy inputs to the government. So they play the role of intermediary. They play the role of they are involved in investigation. They play a role of an educator, and then they also diagnose the problems. They also provide policy inputs to the government, and they enforce the accountability of the government. One more thing that we need to understand, that media not only exposes the limitations in the governance or problems in governance, not only exposes corruption, inefficiency, etc., but media enforces the accountability indirectly by building public opinion, public perception. So media on its own, you cannot say media is a part of that extra constitutional means and mechanism to enforce the accountability of the government. But indirectly they enforce the accountability also by forming public opinion, and they also affect public perception of the government and which developments taking place around. So media plays a very important role. Particularly media working in collaboration with civil society, no doubt enforce the accountability of the government. लेकिन आप उसमें दूसरे व्यू ले सकते हैं कि but at the same time we cannot be oblivious to the fact or reality that many media houses or such institutions are politically inclined, and very often they do not exhibit, or they do not exhibit what they claim for. वो सच ही दिखाएंगे, लेकिन हमेशा ऐसा नहीं है. Their hands fall very heavily on somebody and their hands fall very lightly on somebody else, depending on their little bit of political inclination, or for that matter, their own line of thinking, their policies. Okay, so, and one more thing, that thanks to corporate culture, so goal displacement has taken place in case of some media houses. Not all, but goal displacement has taken place. Their primary objective is to entertain society and not to show the truth. So this is the broader scope, and within the bounds of which you can write the important component. It's clear. So has the media nixed its role in holding the governments accountable and ensuring transparency? No, media is playing a role which can be placed between the two extremes. It has nixed its role. Okay, it has totally abdicated its role, or it is conforming to such role very religiously. This is not the case. They fall between the two extremes. So media plays a very important role, no doubt, in enforcing continuity and transparency in the government, and they play the role of intermediary. They inform the society about the government, educate the people about the government and government programs, projects, policies, line of thinking. And they, on the other hand, they in a way apprise the government of the will and aspirations of society and the problems of society. So they play a role of intermediary. They educate or they investigate. They play the role of investigative journalism, investigative journalism, and they also educate their think tank. They also contribute. So these are the things. And then, on the other hand, but at the same time, we need to be aware of the reality that media houses, many of them are politically inclined. So therefore, they occupy a middle position between the two. Clear? They are not fully abdicated their role, but they are not playing their role to an extent where we can say that they are doing so. They are conforming to journalistic ethics, which is not so much about entertaining. It's not about entertaining the society, which is more about educating the society or informing the society the truth, informing the society about the truth and the reality. Then you have the media next. Then you have Herbert Simon. Is Herbert Simon justified in criticizing some principles of administration as proverbs? Analyze. So you can write on the both sides if you have that argument, and you have that argument. I know. Herbert Simon's criticism. Herbert Simon's criticism of principles of administration is justified to some extent on the ground that such principles of administration were propounded by the classical writers on the basis of very narrow empirical base. Such principles of administration were propounded by classical writers based on their understanding of the functions of organization in a typical American or European ecological setting. So empirical base was narrow, and most of such contribution, these principles of administration, unity of command, supervision, or centralization, decentralization, hierarchy, span of control, at many places they are found to be in self-contradiction. It means if you work on one principle, you end up violating the other. Then they are largely unidimensional. They focused only on non-human component of the organization to the neglect of social or psychological or human content of the organization. They never try to appreciate them in the right earnest. It never happened. So that's why Simon's criticism of principles of administration as proverb cannot be totally cannot be said to be not justified. But at the same time, we should not forget that the Simon, in the course of deliberating on decision making, the dynamics of decision making as an activity in organization, Simon was dealing with the principle of logical positivism. Simon at one place acknowledges that if we really want to improve the efficiency of any organization, we should focus more on facts rather than values. We should ensure that administration remains confined to fact-centric decisions. And by saying so, Simon in a way endorsed the idea of classical writers whom the Simon had criticized by saying that principles are just like proverbs. So to some extent it is justified, but at the same time we should not forget that such principles of administration, even Simon later on accepted such principles of administration constitute the very foundation of organization theories. Because such principles were propounded at a time when organizations were undergoing, organizations were suffering from internal cohesive, lack of internal cohesiveness. Organizations were suffering from, organizations were facing the challenge of financial viability. So that's why classical writers focus so much on structural dimension of organization. Classical writers, and again, there is not so much of, there is nothing wrong in saying so, because classical writers dealt with one of the dimensions of the organization, on the strength of which other dimensions were developed, like social and psychological dimensions of the organization were explored examined, and theories were propounded on the same by Himalayan school of thought and others. So Simon's criticism of principles of administration is justified. Is justified to some extent. Okay, and to some extent, why? Because on the other hand, we need to appreciate that such contributions of the classical writers played an important role in initiating the process of theory building in public administration. Yeah, so it's justified, but it's justified only when we also appreciate the significance of that contribution, even though it was unidimensional, but that unidimensional contribution set the ground for the exploration of other dimensions of organization. Then you have administrative law has evolved from the need to create a system of public administration under law. Administrative law has evolved from the need to create a system of public administration under law. System of public administration under law. So public administration consisting of various institutions, agencies with so much of power, authority, and command over the subject matters of governance, public administration could have become kind of with so much of authority and power, public administration could easily have trampled over the rights of the people. It could have developed dictatorial tendencies had it not been for the administrative law. So administrative law has evolved out of the necessity to develop system of public administration under law. System of public administration. System. Nothing will qualify for system unless it is self-sustaining. And nothing can be self-sustaining if it depends on human behavior. Because human behavior is highly unpredictable and uncertain. Point clear? So therefore administration was to be brought within the bounds of some impersonal entity. So this is administrative law. So administrative law has evolved out of the necessity to keep administration within its legitimate bounds, to keep administration within its boundary of jurisdiction. Because the biggest challenge was to strike fine balance between the necessity to empower public administration so that they could provide goods and services to the society, and on the other hand, ensuring that such power and authority is used only for benefit of society, and such power authority is not used for self-aggrandizement and is not used for anything which can be related to dictatorial tendencies or some kind of authoritarian approach to this society. So the fine balance was to be struck. Administration has to be empowered. Without such empowerment, it cannot provide goods and services, cannot discharge its responsibilities. And on the other hand, we have to ensure that such empowerment does not go to the extent of making public administration so much powerful that it decides the things arbitrarily and it encroaches upon the rights of the people. To strike fine balance between the two came administrative law. So administrative law has evolved from the need to create a system of public administration under law. This is the point. So administrative law has evolved. Administrative law is that part of legal system of a country which define the power, authority, and jurisdiction of public administration, its agencies and officials. It also determines the rules and procedures to be followed by the administrative functionaries. It also provides for their equation of relationship with society, where the authority ends and rights of the people begin. It also ensures that administrative agencies are. It also deals with the manners, means, mechanism to ensure the accountability of public administration to judiciary. So judicial accountability. This is known as administrative law. So administrative law has evolved out of the necessity to develop a system of public administration under law. If system of public administration is not developed under law, there will be no boundary. If there is no boundary, then given the stupendous authority of public administration, power, authority, jurisdiction, it can trample over the rights of the people, and we cannot think of a stable society then. So we have to harness we had to harness the potential of public administration. Whether ये बिल्कुल एलिफेंट की तरह है, एलिफेंट हाथी, हाथी रखना है तो आपको ध्यान देना होगा कि हाथी है तो हाथी के साथ जंजीर भी होनी चाहिए, कि हाथी से जो काम लेना है आप काम वो ले लें, लेकिन उसके बाद उसे कंट्रोल में रखें, जिससे उसके पावर का उपयोग जो है वो प्रोडक्टिव कामों में हो। नहीं तो हाथी का मूड किसी ने हुआ और जंजीर अगर नहीं है तो आपके घर को भी तोड़ देगा, आपको भी तोड़ देगा पूरी तरह से। ठीक है, दिस इज ऑल अबाउट एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव लॉ। और इसमें जो है एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव लॉ हैज इवॉल्व फ्रॉम द नीड, ये जो है ना, फ्रॉम द नीड टू क्रिएट ए सिस्टम ऑफ पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, थोड़ा सा बैकड्रॉप के अंदर वो भी आप दे सकते हो, हैज इवॉल्व फ्रॉम द नीड टू क्रिएट ए सिस्टम, from the need to keep administration within its bound. And why such need? Why is it? Because administration over a period of time has evolved, its operational domain has undergone a lot of expansion, it carries out different kinds of activities. Okay, and accordingly its power authority too has a power and authority, so much of power authority has been conferred on it. So there is a need to ensure that such authority is not misused. That's why system of public administration under law, has to be had to be developed, which has been done by administrative law. Then you have new public management. New public management has actually been a transitory state in evolution from traditional public administration to what is here called new public management. Examine. It's not necessary that you flow along. So you have to examine to what extent it is correct or it is incorrect. Okay, against a balanced approach. The better balanced approach, not only because it has to manage, because this is the reality. So new public management, unlike traditional public administration, have gone through, new public management became very much popular in 1990s. So new public management, unlike traditional public administration, emphasized the necessity of making public agencies management oriented. It basically aimed at incorporating the principles and ideals, or in incorporating that professionalism or such principles of management which had evolved over a long period of time in the private sector to the benefit of public administration. So it is basically concerned with making public administration management oriented, learning things from private sector to the benefit of public administration. New public management, it on the one hand, it talked about widening the range of choices, competition. Basically, it was inspired by market-based principles of market-based economy, widening of the range of choices, competition, state minimalism. Okay, and a more prolific role of the market as the producer and distributor of goods and services, and state playing the role only of regulator and facilitator. So new public management made a significant departure from a long trend of traditional public administration, that we do not look at the private sector, with some kind of doubt and suspicion. Rather, we need to ensure that public and private sector, they act as two wheels in the vehicle of development. But there is no doubt that new public management actually stood for it was characterized by strong advocacy for market-based economy, a strong advocacy for market dominated scene in the deliverance of goods and services. There's no doubt about that. And after that, you have new public governance, public administration, to what is here called new public governance. To answer this question, you need to have a clear picture in your mind. On the one hand, you have traditional public administration, and on the other here you have new public governance. So in traditional public administration, new public governance, and between the two extremes, you have new public management. So new public management is more about making traditional public administration management oriented, with focus on cost consciousness, then scientifically designed rules, regulation, simplification of procedures, more of horizontal structure than vertical structure, then more than one autonomous bodies, agencies, decentralization of power authority, and after that new public management, and then you have new public service, which actually exposed the limitations of new public management on the one hand and suggested a betterment of the same. So new public governance focused on the necessity of involving people in the process of governance. As for example, traditional public administration, they are taking citizens as subjects, New public management says, no, citizens are like our customers. The focus is more on application of economic rationality, but new public management is largely unidimensional. And then new public governance, they are of the view that it suggests that no, our citizens are stakeholders. They are not only customers, they are stakeholders. So therefore, you can say that good things of new public management, the professionalism, greater efficiency, greater economization of operations, all such things were retained with an addition under new public governance that citizens are to be treated as stakeholders. They are to be treated as stakeholders. They are to be treated as they are to be treated as participants in the process of governance. So it focused more on new public governance, focused on not only public-private partnership kind of thing. It focused more on network governance or collaborative governance. Governance is governance and development is a multi-star script. It is not only between public and private equation of relationship, as it was emphasized by new public management. So new public governance says that every single person, citizens of the country, they are the stakeholders. So they focus more on collaborative governance or network governance. So public institutions, private institutions, various NGOs, voluntary agencies, or for that matter, research and development institutions, technology companies, all put together working in a kind of well-defined matrix of interdependency to accomplish best of the goals or to accomplish growth and development of society. So new public governance is the one that is it is in keeping with the latest and contemporary trend, and new public management is in the middle, and then you have traditional public administration. So new public management made an improvement over traditional public administration by making things more efficient, harnessing the potential of the private sector, and new public governance is not in contradiction with new public management. It's a kind of relay race, and from here onwards it simply added other things that we need to go beyond the structure of public and private. We need to go beyond. Growth and development is a multi-star script. We have to involve all such institutions and agencies in a very meaningful or productive matrix. This is the point. So this is you can say is in the course of new public management has actually been a transitory state in evolution from traditional public administration to what is here called. So you can write that new public management, unlike traditional public administration, focused on this thing. Okay? But it was more than a transitory. It was more than a transitory state, because transitory state means it's not so much significant. It's just it's called an alpavastha. It's not like that. So it took traditional public administration one step ahead. It's not so much a transitory state. It contributed immensely in developing a new perspective on public administration and governance, which was later on made comparatively better. So contribution by new public management has contributions under new public management. New public management has a place in the doctrine and the philosophy behind new public governance. Then Mary Parker Follett. Mary Parker Follett pioneered the evolution of socio-psychological approach to the study of organization. This is not very much difficult. Simple question. Most of you have answered, most of you would have answered this question. So Mary Parker Follett is the connecting link between classical writers' structural school of thought on the one hand and humanistic school of thought on the other. So Mary Parker Follett made a significant departure from the ongoing trend in public administration. She made a welcome departure from the structural school of thought, that very that line of thinking which had all pervasive impact in the world of public administration for such a long period of time. So Mary Parker Follett is the connecting link between a structural school of thought and humanistic school of thought. Her contributions, Mary Parker Follett's intellectual contributions, marks a significant and welcome departure from the ongoing trend or line of thinking in public administration. She deviated from that line of thinking and started focusing more on the social and psychological content of the organization. So Mary Parker Follett, you'll have to prove how is that. So Mary Parker Follett, connecting and Mary Parker Follett, unlike classical writers, started focusing on human component, social and psychological component of the organization, and that's why her intellectual reflections are imbued with democratic principles of democratic dynamism and humanism. She defines power not as something to exact obedience but ability to bring changes. Then she deals with the conflict and friction which take place in any organization is a very natural thing. Then how to deal with such conflict is the expression of differences, socially valuable differences, and to deal with that conflict through compromise, domination, compromise, integration. Then she focuses on how much difficult it is to achieve integration. It required very positive mindset and attitude. Then she also deals with environment of giving orders, how to build the desirable attitude in a person for the acceptance of your order and command. Then power, authority. Then authority lies not in the position. Authority lies in your ability to deal with the situation. She focused more on functional authority rather than positional authority. Then Mary Parker Ford says the leader is not the person. So she focused on leadership. Her reflection on leadership is also imbued with democratic values. The leader is not the person who is sitting at the top, not necessarily the person who's sitting at the top. Leader is any person who, in the given situation, is capable of steering the organization out of crisis, the one who is capable of taking decision, to the one to whom things are very much clear to the minutest of details. So in the writings of Mary Parker Follett, so you have to prove that in. अब 150 के अंदर में क्या क्या लिखोगे, लेकिन इसको टच करते हुए आपको जाना है. किसी एक पॉइंट को हम तो एक्सप्लेन कर रहे हैं आपको बताने के, लेकिन आपको उसमें से पॉइंट को टच करना है कि मैरी पाकर फॉलेट्स कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्क्स ए कनेक्टिंग लिंक बिटवीन क्लासिकल राइटर्स एंड ह्यूमनिस्ट स्कूल ऑफ थॉट. ठीक है. एंड शी, अनलाइक क्लासिकल राइटर्स, मैरी पाकर फॉलेट फोकस्ड ऑन सोशल एंड ह्यूमन साइकोलॉजिकल कंटेंट ऑफ द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन विच इज रिफ्लेक्टेड इन हर reflected in her writings on, or her views and opinion, or her writings on the leadership, or for that matter motivation, leadership, or for that matter conflict and the friction in the organization, environment of giving orders, or her understanding of power and authority. In this way you have to explain. She also identified the psychological, the motor state, habit pattern, psychological problems, inhibitors in acceptance and compliance, acceptance of orders, compliance with the orders. So instead of focusing on rules, regulation, method, technique, process, she identified so well that how human and social factors contribute to various problems as well as solution in the organization. We need to take care of that human and social content. Apparently, or it appears that problems are there because of something lacking in rules, regulation, structure. But in reality, many of the problems in the organization are actually related with human behavior. Okay, you don't know how to issue orders, manner of giving orders. Then why do you fail? There is no compliance of your orders, very poor compliance of your orders, because you fail to build attitude in the person for the acceptance of orders. Integration does not take place. Why? Because you have something in your mind, at the back of your mind, and there's something that you are giving expression to. You lack that keen perception, good intention to sit together and resolve the problem permanently with some kind of value addition. So Mary Parker Follett so successfully established that good number of problems emanate from human behavior, not so much from the structure. What was initiated by Mary Parker Follett, later on, Mary Parker Follett did not give birth to any humanist school of thought. What was initiated by Mary Parker Follett was taken up by Elton Mayo and team, and a full-fledged humanist school of thought came into existence. Then you have, under the new public management framework, public-private partnership that I was discussing. Public-private partnership challenges the entropy of closed and open models of organization analysis. अब देखो इस क्वेश्चन में, ये क्वेश्चन अगर आप अलग अलग केवल टॉपिक पढ़ के जाओगे, न्यू पब्लिक मैनेजमेंट पढ़ लिया, पूरा रट लिया, पूरी थ्योरी, तब भी नहीं कर पाओगे. न्यू पब्लिक मैनेजमेंट और फिर पब्लिक प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप, कुछ इसके बारे में भी जानोगे. पब्लिक प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप पे नहीं लिखना है. चैलेंजेस द एंट्रोपी. अब एंट्रोपी का मतलब कई लोगों को नहीं पता होगा तो फंसोगे. एंट्रोपी ऑफ क्लोज्ड एंड ओपन मॉडल्स ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. इसमें सिस्टम थियरी भी है, न्यू पब्लिक मैनेजमेंट भी है, और उसके अंदर है पब्लिक प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप. Under the new public management framework, new public management basically aimed at making public administration management oriented, basically aimed at harnessing the potential of both public and private sector, bringing them together. Okay, in furtherance of the values like the efficiency, economy, or effectiveness. Point clear? So public sector and private sector should not be viewed as contradictory to one another. Should not be, they should be viewed as complementary to each other. We need for progress and development is stability as well as change. The stability can be given by public sector institutions, agencies, their commitment to social justice, economic justice, political justice, welfare, development, and dynamism and professionalism to come from. It has to come from the private sector. So public and private sector put together. So public-private partnership. This model inspired by the necessity to harness the potential of both to bring them together to take advantage of complementarities between public and private organization in furtherance of the growth and development. This is something which is inspired by the necessity to avoid the limits of or the hindrances of extremes. In system theory, अगर system theory पढ़े तो system theory में था ना open model and closed model. So under the framework new public management के अंदर क्या हो गया public private partnership. So inspired by the principles of new public management, public private partnership model is basically inspired by the idea to explore the complementarities between public and private organizations and to avoid the extremes of open system and closed system. Extremes of closed system and open system. Closed system is the one. Traditional public administration, rigid structure, things are dominated by the state. Public agencies control everything from top to bottom. And then you have a very complex rules and regulation and top-down authority and bottom-up, conformity to principles of accountability and responsibility. No horizontal structure, no autonomy. So this is a closed model. Closed model, it means there is a wall of separation between the institutions, agencies of government on the one hand, society on the other. An open model on the other hand, just transport on the opposite. Open model is the one where there is no wall of separation. It means organization is viewed as deeply embedded in society. One is clear? Through a process of input, throughput, and output. So there's and in search of stability, it believes in. The open model means an organization believes in interacting with society. Its structure is less vertical and more horizontal. Various autonomous bodies working together. So open model, closed model. This stands for centralization. This stands for decentralization. This stands for application of theory X. This stands for application of theory Y. This stands for superimposed control, and this stands for bottom-up control. Something like this. Getting a point? This is transfer authoritarian kind of leadership. It's not a decentralized democratic style of leadership. But remember, this closed model and open model, both of them have their advantages and disadvantages, merits and demerits, depending on what kind of situations, circumstances there are surrounding. I'm just explaining. I'm not giving you the perfect answer. I'm just explaining the closed model and open model. To avoid the extremes, the merits and demerits, the middle position is required to be obtained by most of the organizations. So most of the organizations, successful organizations, can be found to be avoiding the extremes of decentralization and extremes of centralization. जितने भी MNCs है सब के अंदर आप देखोगे प्रॉपर बैलेंस है सेंट्रलाइजेशन एंड डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन. There are certain things which can be controlled and regulated in much better way applying the principles of closed model, and there are things which are required to be taken care of as an open model. In the same organization you can see the beauty of both. This is the ideal condition, occupying the middle position between the two. Clear? So public-private partnership, what is being said that under the new public management framework, which stands for harmonious interblending of the positivities of public and private sector, this public-private partnership, this model challenges the entropy. Entropy means measure of unavailable energy. So closed and open model, दोनों के जो limitations हैं उसको वो challenge करता है and occupies the middle position. It challenges the entropy of closed and open models of organization. Point clear? Entropy का मतलब समझते हो? Entropy is the measure of unavailable energy. जब कहीं पे लिखा हो something is moving towards positive entropy. If something is moving towards, we say that there is a positive entropy, it means it is moving towards self-destruction. things are moving in negative entropy. And negative entropy means that an organization is undergoing some kind of self-elaboration. Okay, but extremes of both are dangerous. Extremes of both. So positive entropy and negative entropy. So entropy of closed model, entropy of open model are to be avoided. Answer is public-private partnership. We don't want a situation to be where the things are being controlled by one giant monolithic structure of the state, bureaucracy controlling everything, and we don't want a kind of situation wherein everything or largely most of the things are controlled by the private sector. We have to occupy the middle position between the two, public-private partnership. Therefore, challenges the entropy of closed and open models of organization. और ये closed and open model system theory में. Then you have in conflict situation in organization, leadership migrates to the aggressive and relegates the emotionally matured to the background. Discuss. अब देखो इसमें कॉन्फ्लिक्ट सिचुएशन, लीडरशिप क्वेश्चन है लीडरशिप पे, लेकिन जो बुक में पढ़ के आया लीडरशिप उसमें कहीं भी इसका आंसर नहीं मिलेगा. ये आपको अपने कॉमन सेंस से ऑब्जर्वेशन से लिखना पड़ेगा. किसी बुक में नहीं. लीडरशिप में क्या, व्हाट इज लीडरशिप, डेफिनेशंस ऑफ लीडरशिप गिवन बाय डिफरेंट स्कॉलर्स, है ना. उससे अलग अलग फिर देखोगे लीडरशिप पे थियरी, लिकर्ट की थियरी जो होगी लीडरशिप पे वो हो जाएगी. उसके स्ट्रक्चरल थियरी, बिहेवियरल थियरी, लाइफ साइकिल थियरी, कंटिजेंसी थियरी, ऐसे बहुत सारी थियरीज होंगी लीडरशिप पे. लेकिन वो सब ज़्यादा काम की नहीं. उससे जो कंटेंट आपने अगर अच्छी तरह समझ रखा है देन यू कैन अप्लाई इट टू सम एक्सटेंट. बट यहाँ पे आपको बहुत ज़्यादा कॉमन सेंस अप्लाई करना पड़ेगा. इन कॉन्फ्लिक्ट सिचुएशन इन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, लीडरशिप माइग्रेट्स टू द एग्रेसिव. In conflicting situation, because organizational behavior is motivated by the necessity. Organizational behavior is motivated by the necessity to routinize things, regularize things, to stabilize things. Constant concern ये होता है कुछ भी घटे लेकिन तुरंत to restore the things to normalcy. So in conflicting situation means that something is happening. It means something is happening which is at variance with how things should have happened. The friction and conflict, that means conflicting situation. So in conflicting situation, in general, the tendency of all would be to see the things, becoming normal. So leadership migrates to aggressive, means leadership naturally migrates to the one. The word aggressive here has to be taken broadly, not in the literal sense, aggressive. So aggressive leadership migrates to aggressive, those members who appear to be very much decisive, who appear to be exhibiting lot of energy, lot of decisiveness, lot of commitment, or commitment to restore the things to normalcy or to take revenge for something. Getting a point to come up with, some promises, the short term, beauty, you can say that their decisiveness, their intensity of effort, their commitment, it creates a kind of a sense of psychological security or emotional stability among the people who are adversely affected by conflicting situations. So that's why leadership migrants, they look up to the aggressive person for leadership, because he appears to them as very much decisive, very much committed, capable of restoring the things to normalcy at the earliest. He exhibits a lot of energy. He gives them a kind of psychological security, emotional stability. Don't worry, I'm there, I will get done. Everybody wants the risky things and difficult things to be done by others. Majority of the people are ordinary people. कोई निकल करके आ जाए भगत सिंह जैसा, कोई चंद्रशेखर आजाद जैसा. So that's why leadership migrates to the aggressive person. And on the other hand, those who are emotionally very much matured, they look at the things from different perspective. What will be the short-term consequences? What will be the long-term consequences? Those who know more, those who are emotionally very much matured, their response will be different. The response will be different. Their response will not be like playing to the gallery. It's not like, generating a lot of energy among the people or making promises. They will focus on short-term and long-term gains and losses. They have different kind of course of action in their mind. They know the pros and cons. So they may take a lot of time, observation, analysis. That's why they are relegated to background. They are relegated to background not because they are not capable of dealing with the situation, but they do not appear so much promising in the given situation. People do not opt for so much of analysis or something. Too much of analysis, observe. They are not looking for that. They are looking for to come and take action and restore the things to normalcy. That's why a emotionally matured person, emotionally matured or relegated to background. The background. Clear? So this it happens because of interplay of psychological and social factors and situational factors. Okay, and once again the situation is over. Now this problem has been solved. Interesting thing to note is this, that leadership migrates to, remember, human behavior is a very dynamic component of organization. Leadership migrates to aggressive, okay, but it is not stable. After some time, people may come to know that the decision which was taken, running from pillar to post hurriedly, the decision was taken. It appeared to be promising at that time, but in the long term, it can be very much dangerous and damaging to the larger interest of, and may damage the larger interest of society or the organization. And that case, again, the organization for leadership will look up to emotionally matured. The one who was relegated to the background may come in front, and those who were in the front, they will be beaten of black and blue. बेस्ट एग्जाम्पल बता दे, बेस्ट अब खुद से कैसे बोले, मतलब वो एग्जाम्पल जो मुझे ऐसा लगता है, डोनाल्ड ट्रंप, ठीक है, अभी देखो उनकी हरकतें कैसी है, उनकी हरकतें जिस ढंग की, जैसे होते हैं ना 22-25 साल के लड़के जैसे बाइक चलाते हैं, कैसे बाइक चलाते हैं, मतलब कि कुछ सोचना नहीं है, समझना नहीं है, मैंने अनफॉर्चुनेटली ऐसे ही है, मतलब वो अमेरिका को ऐसे चला रहे हैं जैसे कि 22-25 साल का जो बाइक राइडर होता है वो उस ढंग से ऐसे चला रहे हैं जो भी। तो अभी शॉर्ट टर्म में उनको चौधरी बनने का बहुत शौक है, पूरी दुनिया हमसे डरती है, जिस पे चाहे टैरिफ यहाँ वहाँ सबको सबमिट करना होगा, कुछ लोग सबमिट किया, तो क्या हुआ, शॉर्ट टर्म में ऐसा लग रहा है, बहुत से अमेरिकन को भी लग रहा होगा कि हाँ डोनाल्ड ट्रंप और सब उनसे डरते हैं, ये वो सब सबमिट करें शॉर्ट टर्म में। लेकिन शॉर्ट टर्म में लीडरशिप माइग्रेट्स टू डोनाल्ड ट्रंप, ठीक है, कुछ और लोग होंगे जो कुछ समझा रहे होंगे, लेकिन वो नहीं सही कर रहे ट्रंप। लेकिन 6 महीने, साल भर, 2 साल बाद जब अमेरिका की स्थिति बिगड़ेगी, साल भर के अंदर ही समझ में आ जाएगा, तब वही बहुत सारे लोग जो हैं फिर रियलाइज करेंगे कि हमने एक गलत आदमी को सपोर्ट कर दिया था। उसके बाद फिर कोई मैच्योर पर्सन होगा जो अमेरिका के प्रेसिडेंट के लायक होगा, ये तो किसी भी सूरत में उसके लायक नहीं है, इसने प्रेसिडेंसी को डुबा दिया पूरी तरह से, अपनी क्रेडिबिलिटी गंवा दी अपनी, ये किसी के दोस्त नहीं हो सकते, ठीक है। तो फिर बाद में कोई मैच्योर पर्सन जब आएगा तो वो फिर आके सब चीज़ों को फिर से रिस्टोर करेगा, तब लोगों के समझ में आएगा, फिर वो भारत के साथ बातचीत चालू होगी, वार्ता चालू होगी, फिर उन चीज़ों को वो नॉर्मल से को स्टोर करने की कोशिश करेंगे। ऐसा मुझे नहीं लगता है कि कोई बहुत लॉन्ग टर्म भारी डैमेज हो गया, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, हर दिन स्थिति बदलती है। वो जस्टिन ट्रूडो, क्या नाम था उसका, कनाडा का जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर था, उसने भी ऐसे ही किया था, फिर उसके जाने के बाद दूसरे प्राइम मिनिस्टर आ गए, अब फिर से रिलेशनशिप को नॉर्मलाइज करने की कोशिश की जा रही है। नॉर्मल चीज ये है, नॉर्मल ये है कि चीजों को नॉर्मलाइज किया जाए, नॉर्मल ये नहीं है कि चीजों को एबनॉर्मल छोड़ दिया जाए, ठीक है। सो दैट्स व्हाई आई सेड दैट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बिहेवियर इज मोटिवेटेड बाय द नेसेसिटी टू रिस्टोर द थिंग्स टू नॉर्मलसी, इसमें एप्लीकेबल होगा ये, ठीक है। सो दैट्स व्हाई लीडरशिप गोज टू द एग्रेसिव in conflict situation. Then you have the foundation of public administration, new public management and public governance. New public governance and public governance rest on rule of law. So foundation of public administration, new public management and new public governance rest on rule of law. Discuss simple. What will be the theory and what will be the model of governance? Okay, one thing is has no exception, which is universally applicable, is that is just rule of law. What does that mean? It means whatever be the model of governance, that model of governance can never be stable if it depends on personal entity of any leader. It depends on personality or person of any leader. So whatever be the model of governance, rule of law provides that stable disposition. Rule of law means an impersonal entity. So leaders may come and go. Some positive or negative developments may take place under one or other model of governance, but as long as rule of law is there, rule of law brings stability, it brings regularity, it brings universality, it brings predictability, which impart a stable disposition to any model of governance. And unless that stable disposition is achieved, it cannot orchestrate, it cannot bring changes all around. The one who is not stable in himself, how can that bring stability in polity or society or culture? So you need stability in different parts of life. So the administration is sitting in the center. So it is the rule of law that brings stability. That's why it is required. What is clear? So if rule of law constitutes the foundation, leadership of any prime minister or president may be deficient in one of the respect, but to a great extent, such deficiencies are not allowed to find expression if you have rule of law. Rule of law. Whatever happens, it will happen on the basis of law. But again, rule of law too is not the ultimate answer to all problems. Rule of law may become a liability if society is not progressive. If institutions of the government, they are not progressive enough to realize that every law has a context of time and place. In the course of evolution, things undergo changes in different aspects of life. Therefore, laws are also required to be changed accordingly, required to be amended, and sometimes are required to be replaced by a totally new law or legal system. So, rule of law provides stability, but that stability may become stagnancy if law is not amended from time to time. Foundation of public administration and public governance. Then you have the principles of checks and balances. The principles of checks and balances count among the most fundamental constitutional values. Yes, the most fundamental concept. Here you can apply your understanding of system theory. The principles of checks and balances constitute the fundamental principles, because principles of checks and balances ensure that the system of government or entire society as a system, that system cannot become self-sustaining, cannot be stable, cannot be dynamic unless different subsystems who put together constitute the system, they exercise principles of checks and balances. It means successful functioning of any polity, administration, or government, or governmental institutions, or successful functioning of any system depends on very smooth relationship among different subsystems. There has to be some kind of pattern. In fact, what is the definition of a system? A system cannot qualify to be called a system unless it is proved that different subsystems in the system interact with one another with some kind of discernible regularity, some kind of discipline, some kind of predictability. And that happens only when principles of checks and balances are applied. It means every subsystem discharges its responsibility, carries out the work, activity, or functions. At the same time, it ensures that it does not create any liability for problem for other subsystem. It does not allow other subsystem to cross that limit. So counter check and balances, something you have executive, you have legislature, judiciary. So it is not enough that three wings of the government, they are simply discharging their responsibilities in their domain. No, they have to ensure that others also remain within the bounds of their jurisdiction, and if they transcend that limit, then it has to be checked so that all the three remain within the bounds. Example, so in the context of government and this is one of the fundamental principles, because principles, in the absence of principles in checks and balances, many islands of powers will come into existence, and there will be wholesome chaos. In more specific term, the principles of checks and balance constitute one of the fundamental principles governing our polity, without which it will be difficult to achieve stability and change. Principles of checks and balance ensure that every subsystem and system exercises its authority not only to discharge a responsibility but also to exercise check on the exercise a check if the other subsystems transcend the limit of their authority. In this way, the checks and balances ensure that every institution remains within the bounds of its jurisdiction and nothing is allowed to go beyond the limit. In this way, stability is achieved. And if this stability is achieved, then only we can think of change and development. So principles of checks and balances. This is the application. If this principle of checks and balances, if it is not followed, then the system will become not so much sustainable. It will be difficult to sustain the system. There will be conflict, there will be friction, there will be chaos. Many independent institutions will come into existence in their own right, listening to none. जैसे प्रिंसिपल ऑफ चेक्स एंड बैलेंसेस को लेकर के अभी फिलहाल हम लोग के देश में भी चर्चा चल रही है क्या, कि जुडिशरी काफी हद तक एग्जीक्यूटिव और लेजिस्लेचर को कंट्रोल कर लेती है। ठीक है, आप देखिएगा एवरी सेकंड डे थर्ड डे सुप्रीम कोर्ट का कुछ ना कुछ आता रहता है, सुप्रीम कोर्ट और हाई कोर्ट। ठीक है, लेकिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट और हाई कोर्ट को कंट्रोल बाकी लोग उस हद तक नहीं कर पा रहे हैं। ठीक है, अपॉइंटमेंट, प्रमोशन, ट्रांसफर, इन सब चीज़ों में देखोगे तो अभी बहुत सारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन एक्सपर्ट्स ऐसी बात मानते हैं कि प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ चेक्स एंड बैलेंसेस तो है हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में, लेकिन अब ऐसा लग रहा है इन द वेक ऑफ जुडिशियल एक्टिविज्म, जुडिशियल एसेंडेंसी, जुडिशियल ओवररीच, ठीक है, इट अपीयर्स दैट somewhere the principle is being compromised. We need some very effective constitutional means and mechanism to exercise control and vigilance over judiciary, to bring greater transparency in the appointment, promotion, transfer of judges, and to ensure that they conform to ethical and moral code of conduct meant for them. There should be means and mechanism to take punitive action as well. We cannot think of any island of power in democracy. Then delegated legislation should be clear and should confine to the limits determined by the legislature. Simple point. Delegated legislation should be clear and should confine to the limits determined by the legislature. Legislature, it enacts law in skeleton form, and within the bounds of law, within the bounds of law, legislature enacts a law. Law is enacted in skeleton form, and then blood and flesh is required to be provided by the bureaucracy and the executive. Point is clear. So, but bureaucracy in the course of framing rules and regulations and bylaws should never transcend the limit of the law. Otherwise, it will be very much unconstitutional. So, in our constitution, legislature has the exclusive jurisdiction over the enactment of law, but because of practical problems, because scarcity of time, lack of technical knowledge of the subject matter, and legislature being not so much proximate to the ground conditions and reality, so legislature shares a part of its lawmaking authority in favor of the executive, the administration, and bureaucracy, so that they could frame rules and regulations for the implementation of such laws. There is no delegated legislation. So delegated legislation ideally should remain always confined to the boundary of the law. Okay, but very often it happens that the bureaucracy or the administration, the administration uses its discretion beyond the limits set by the law. It happens, the misuse of administrative discretion under delegated legislation. So question is how to check that. Okay, delegated legislation should be clear and should confine to the limits determined by the legislature. When the law is enacted by the legislature, law clears the intent and the purpose and the boundary. Okay, that boundary should never be crossed by those who are supposed to implement such law by framing rules and regulations. Your rules and regulations in their scope, in their content, should never transcend the boundaries set by the law. If it happens, it is unconstitutional. It means people would be governed by something which was never intended and which was never enacted by their representatives sitting in the legislature. But how to check and how to ensure that it does not happen? So, in the light of the statement, explain how misuse of administrative discretion can be checked. So, it can be checked because traditionally there has been means and mechanism. You have a parliamentary check on delegated legislation. You have a parliamentary committee on delegated legislation which examine how this administrative discretion has been used, how this administrative discretion has been used by bureaucracy. Okay, and they also submit their report. And then the most important check on administrative discretion under delegated legislation is judicial scrutiny, power of judicial review. So Supreme Court, High Court, they can examine within their respective jurisdiction any case of substantive ultra-vires, or for that matter procedural ultra-vires, because there's a possibility that administration has not followed the rules and procedures they were supposed to follow, or in terms of the rules, regulations, bylaws, they have transcended the scope of the law. So there can be substantive or substantive ultra-vires or procedural ultra-vires, so parliamentary control, judicial control. But what is expected of you in this question that, Yes, in the light of the statement, explain how misuse of administrative discretion can be checked. So it can be checked. इसमें कुछ कंटेम्प्रेरी ट्रेंड्स होगा, तो इसमें उस पर लिखोगे कि पार्लियामेंट जो है वो तो चेक करती है, पार्लियामेंट्री कमेटी ऑन डेलीगेशन से, जुडिशरी जो है जुडिशियल स्क्रूटनी, पावर ऑफ जुडिशियल रिव्यू, बट इन कंटेम्प्रेरी टाइम्स वी नीड टू एजुकेट एंड वी नीड टू इन्फॉर्म द पीपल थ्रू आरटीआई, थ्रू पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट लिटिगेशन, ठीक है, then public participation in the decision making process. So we can make use of contemporary, you can tools and techniques related to e-governance, so we can, to a great extent, we can check the possibilities of administrative discretion being misused by bureaucracy. इस क्वेश्चन का जो स्पिरिट है वो उस आंसर को सुनने का नहीं है कि पार्लियामेंट कैसे कंट्रोल करती है, जुडिशरी ये तो लंबे समय चला रहा है. इन कंटेम्प्रेरी टाइम्स हाउ टू चेक दैट, we can check it if we improve the informed interaction between administration and society. ठीक है, then we need to amend right to information act if required to widen its scope. ठीक है, so we need to create conditions for enforcement of accountability of administration by media, civil society, collaborative action should take place. We should encourage that. So RTI, then public interest litigation, ठीक है, then close interaction between administration and society, then digital tools, techniques, method, process which facilitate participation of people in decision making process and which make it mandatory for bureaucracy to share all information with the society to bring in public domain to the extent required. So that can be a check on administrative discretion being misused under delegated legislation. It is more about information, it is more about education, it is more about making use of digital tools, technology, etc. to restrict such possibilities, improving and developing means of accountability. The greater the transparency, the greater the accountability, the better the education, information awareness, the lesser the possibilities of misuse of administrative discretion under delegated legislation. Then you have leadership is not only about taking credit for success, but also owning up and being accountable for failures. ये भी है, question is on leadership, but it is not related to theories on leadership. Again, it demands application. So leadership is not only about taking credit for success. It is also about assuming the responsibility for any failure, and as owning up and being accountable for failures. By doing so, ठीक है, इस में आपको एक्सप्लेन करना है, इसको इलस्ट्रेट करना है, एग्जांपल भी दे सकते हो. बाय व्हेन लीडर्स, effective leadership demands that you assume responsibility for failures, you hold yourself accountable for any kind of failure. By doing so, on the one hand, you earn the trust and confidence of your followers, those who are working with you. You earn the trust and confidence and respect of those. How? That you insulate them against any kind of charges. That as a leader, you assume the responsibility. So you provide them a kind of psychological and emotional security, some kind of stability, that you need not worry, I have assumed the responsibility. You focus more on your work and effort, that yes, we can rectify it and we can improve the things. So on the one hand, you provide them security and stability. This is about effective leadership, emotional security, psychological security, and then you ensure that their level of morale and motivation, it does not go down because of such failure. You bear the responsibility. Then you build very good relationship, because when you assume the responsibility, then you command so much of respect of your followers. Then you also convey the message by your action, by owning up the failure. You convey the message that leadership is not about preaching, it is about teaching by your action. When you own up, when you hold yourself accountable, it means you convey the message that is a part of life. It happens. Even I have accepted, if something like this happens on your part, accept it honestly and move ahead. In this way, you bring greater transparency, greater commitment to achieve that internal cohesiveness. This is all about effective leadership. Leadership is not only about issuance of order and command. One can inherit a position of leadership, but one cannot sustain it. Leadership invariably involves some kind of psychological and economic exchange between leaders and followers. So effective leadership demands that you have to earn the trust and confidence and respect of your followers, and then you develop them into a team. It acts as a owning up, your failure, holding yourself accountable. It acts as an integrative force. That my leader is so much honest, and we should behave like this. So overall environment of the organization becomes positive in this aspect. That they learn, because followers, they imitate or they learn from their leaders. In case of failure, one should accept it honestly, and then only, or individuals or groups, they can move ahead and organization will be successful. So leadership is not only about taking credit for success, but also owning up and being accountable for failure. Then our example, elucidate example देखो क्या है, नरेंद्र मोदी, अभी जो हम बता रहे थे, फार्म लॉज को लेकर काफी अपोजिशन हुआ, हंगामा हुआ, ठीक है, अलग अलग उसमें कुछ वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट भी थे, ठीक है, कुछ लोकल ग्लोबल ऐसा कुछ नेक्सस भी था, कुछ बाहर के लोग भी उसको समर्थन कर रहे थे, खालिस्तानी भी उसके अंदर घुस गए, जो भी हो स्थिति ऐसी बनी, उस स्थिति से बाहर निकलने का रास्ता क्या? ठीक है, नरेंद्र मोदी आए, हमारे प्रधानमंत्री, माननीय प्रधानमंत्री आए और आकर के उन्होंने घोषणा कर दी, बताया राष्ट्र के नाम संदेश कि भाई एक ऐसी स्थिति आ गई है, और उन्होंने कहा कि शायद मेरी तपस्या में कहीं कमी रह गई होगी, ठीक है, कि आप सब लोगों को कन्विंस नहीं कर पाए या कंसेंसस बिल्डअप नहीं हो पाया। उन्होंने पूरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, मतलब पूरे फार्म लॉज होते उसके पीछे, पूरी ब्यूरोक्रेसी, सब लोग लगे थे उसके बीच में, कितने लोगों का कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन उसके अंदर होगा, डिबेट, डिस्कशन, कंसल्टेशन, ड्राफ्टिंग, ये सब सारी चीज़ें होगी, पार्लियामेंट वगैरह से इसको पास करना सही चाहिए, लेकिन उन्होंने पूरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी खुद ले ली। इसको बोलते हैं लीडरशिप, इफेक्टिव लीडरशिप। ऐसे ही वो इतने बड़े ग्लोबल लीडर नहीं है, ठीक है, ऐसे ही कोई नहीं हो जाता है ग्लोबल लीडर। एक बात के लिए कोई हो भी सकता है 6 महीने, साल भर कंसिस्टेंटली, आप देखिए उनको, वो साधारण लीडर नहीं है। 50 लोग यहाँ वहाँ, हजारों लाखों लोग क्रिटिसाइज करते फिरते हैं, उसको बोलते हैं लीडर। उन्होंने रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी उसकी ले ली। इससे क्या हुआ कि बाकी सब लोग बिल्कुल फ्री, नेक्स्ट अपना काम पे लग गए सब लोग। मोरल मोटिवेशन किसी का गिरने नहीं दिया उन्होंने, जो कुछ है मैं लीडर हूँ, मैं सब देख लूंगा, ठीक है। और उन्होंने एक मैसेज भी दिया कि आप प्रधानमंत्री के पद पे भी हैं, कहीं पर अगर आपको लगता है कोई ईगो नहीं, कोई जिद नहीं कि नहीं हमारे पर अथॉरिटी, अगर चाहते हैं तो लॉ विड्रॉ, वो विड्रॉ नहीं करते, वो आप कितने तमाशा करते, स्टेट से आप उलझोगे, आपको बिल्कुल समझ लेते, टैकल कर लेते वो, लेकिन उनको ऐसा नहीं चाहिए, ठीक है। नेक्स्ट, bureaucracy constitutes the imaginary state and is the spiritualism of state explain। ये क्वेश्चन जो है वो थोड़ा भीड़ से हट करके है, इज नॉर्मल। देखिए इसे विबियन मॉडल ब्यूरोक्रेसी, लेकिन क्वेश्चन ये नहीं कि फीचर्स ऑफ विबियन मॉडल और समथिंग, क्या क्वेश्चन शानदार बनाए। ब्यूरोक्रेसी कॉन्स्टिट्यूट्स द इमेजिनरी स्टेट। यहाँ पे इमेजिनरी स्टेट जो है, इसके एक दो मायने हो सकते हैं अलग अलग, इसमें थोड़ा पॉलिटिकल साइंस की थ्योरी भी लग सकती है, ठीक है। देन एंड इट इज द स्पिरिचुअलिज्म ऑफ द स्टेट। लेकिन ये जो वर्ड है स्पिरिचुअलिज्म ऑफ द स्टेट, एक इसका एक पॉजिटिव कॉन्टेशन है स्पिरिचुअलिज्म, ये पॉजिटिव सेंस भी होता है। और यहाँ पे एक्सप्लेन मतलब आपको एक फ्लो में चलना है, तो इसका जो एक फ्लो है वो अगर पॉजिटिव साइड अगर लेते हैं तो वो कहीं ज़्यादा सही होगा, क्योंकि अगर नेगेटिव लेते हो तो इन दोनों के बीच का जो है वो कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन जो होगा उसको एस्टेब्लिश करना, दैट विल बी डिफिकल्ट। ब्यूरोक्रेसी कॉन्स्टिट्यूट्स द imaginary state and the spiritualism, imaginary state and the spiritualism of state। Bureaucracy constitutes an imaginary state. Imaginary means it is not real or it is an ideal. Bureaucracy is not state. Remember, bureaucracy is not a state or government in itself. Bureaucracy is a powerful instrument. Bureaucracy is a powerful instrument in the hands of state. Bureaucracy exercises authority of the state. Bureaucracy exercises authority of the state to deal with different subject matters of governance. It has adjudicative power, quasi-legislative power, quasi-judicial power, regulatory power, then the power to carry out developmental functions and many more things. Whatever remains, that also come within the bounds of it. All pervasive, all powerful, very powerful entity. So bureaucracy constitutes the imaginary state. Imaginary state is an ideal state with so much, despite having so much of power and authority. Bureaucracy, what are the ideals? It has to conform. It conforms to the principles of rationality, objectivity, impersonality, principles of anonymity. Bureaucracy, this is the imaginary state. Bureaucracy is not a state in the real sense. is an imaginary state. It exercises authority of a state with this kind of principle that it appears like an ideal state, and then it is the spiritualism of state. It means spiritualism means it is an embodiment. Bureaucracy as an agent of the state, it is an embodiment of ethical and moral values of the state, which the state stands for. Okay, and then its purpose, its objective. So bureaucracy is not a state, but it represents authority of state in a very carefully designed, the structure defined by some integrity principles and values. In reality, things may be at variance with it to some extent, as Karl Marx says. Okay, but it represents that ideal state. Point clear? Imaginary state, but state with that ideal conditions, objectivity, rationality, it has to be impartial, all such things. And then it also constitutes the speech. It expresses the spirituality, that invisible force which governs its actions. Okay, so it constitutes the soul of the state. State has tremendous authority, but actually it is exercised by this. And then bureaucracy stands for some ethical and moral standards and values which are universal. It is required to be followed all over the world. This is about bureaucracy. So we have discussed the section A, and in the next session we'll discuss the section B. So up to this, I think most of the questions have been discussed. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.